You're listening to A Radio.
Thank you for joining us. You're listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. We are on Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. You can find us on most social media platforms such as iTunes, Spotify and iHeartRadio. Go to our website, aradio.wordpress.com, for details, where you'll find more content and details on our podcasts and more. So I wanted to do this piece. I've entitled it Trudeau, Non-Stop Attack on the West Could Backfire. I'm going to play for you two pieces that are from the Calgary Sun. One is a comment made by a Trudeau supporter, in other words somebody from the government, demanding that Alberta do this and do that to fit into the carbon tax model, which the rest of Canada is being forced into. And the second part is the response. Now, to me, these tell me how dangerous Trudeau is to democracy in Canada. Yet the mainstream media are stum because they support Trudeau. They're not independent, they're not fair-minded, they're not open to an alternative view. In his case, he's forgotten. This commentator is here to remind him, Justin Trudeau, yes, you are the leader of the federal Liberals in Canada, and yes, you are Prime Minister, but you don't have a majority. You didn't win one in the last general election, so you might be Prime Minister in the current Parliament, but at some point in the not-too-distant future, we hope, your policies and positions will be challenged. You will slip up. You will make a mistake which will offend the Bloc. You'll make a mistake that offends the NDP. And that is when all your pack of cards will collapse. But more importantly than that at the moment, you are the Prime Minister of a democracy. This is not China, and you cannot wave your hand and make it so. If you continue to do so, it's not Quebec you have to worry about. It's Alberta. And I give you fair warning, if you try and force your will on any province, let alone Alberta, that does not wish it so, you are heading for a long and drawn-out constitutional crisis of your own making. And if you want to continue to stoke the fires of disunity, in the West in particular or elsewhere, then you may in fact get your wish. In the case of Alberta, there is an ever greater push to secede from Canada. There will be very little that you could do about it. Militarily, the Canadian Armed Forces are, politely, how can I put it, weak. If they were faced with an armed standoff, well trained they may be, but outmatched they definitely are. And you would be facing a constitutional crisis of your own making, just for your beliefs, which are unproven. Albertans have had enough, and they're just about to move to the next step because they don't have any political recourse. You've made sure of that. You can only stamp on people once. The second time, they can see it coming, and they'll reach for a bat, for self-defence of course, and who knows what that bat represents. Tread carefully, Mr. Trudeau. The ice is real thin in the West, and I will add, not only in the West. Here's that first piece. Both pieces are from the Calgary Sun. The first one is entitled, Trudeau Arm Twists Alberta. Play ball or no oil sands mine? Justin Trudeau twists Alberta's arms and he's probably enjoying it, putting the screws to Alberta. The Prime Minister knows Alberta wants this king-size tech frontier oil sands mine. Bad, real bad. More jobs, better economy. Premier Jason Kenney's election promise, so Trudeau ups the ante. Time to squeeze Alberta. The one doing the dirty work is not Trudeau. He's got Mother Earth climate change warrior leading the charge. A North Vancouver guy by the name of Jonathan Wilkinson. Wilkinson speaks Tuesday. You don't have to do a lot of reading between the lines to spot what he's being called these days. A quid pro quo? A this for that? A trade-off? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I might scratch yours. Yes, Wilkinson says before tech oil sands mine gets the green light, Trudeau and his inner circle will look at how Alberta is helping Canada reach its net zero emissions by 2050. Alberta will have to play ball. Trudeau's point man on climate change tells us it's oh so important all provinces do their bit. They need to be acting to meet emission-reducing targets. Wait for it. Not done. Isn't Alberta fighting Trudeau in court over the carbon tax the Liberals just imposed on Albertans? Quote, the most recent actions are fighting the federal government on the issue of the pricing of pollution, unquote, says Wilkinson, speaking of Alberta. Ouch. Why stop there? Quote, I think what we're looking for is concrete action on climate change, unquote. Methinks this means Trudeau and company want more than what Alberta is doing now. If Alberta doesn't get with the programme, then the Liberal Ottawa can say it's the province's fault the oil sands mine is not a go. It was Alberta's project to lose. Jason Nixon is Kenney's Environment Minister, a mince-no-words, straight shooter who gets his political cues from places like hometown Sundry A&W, not from the virtual signalling latte lifters inhabiting toner reaches of BC's lower mainland. It's late Tuesday. Nixon is not a happy camper. He feels Trudeau's man showed a lack of respect to Alberta and isn't being smart if he wants to build a relationship with Alberta. Nixon believes there's no reason the Teck Frontier oil sands mine shouldn't go ahead. Teck has followed every rule, done everything right. So why is this a do or die line in the sand project? Quote, if the federal government is willing to stop this project, then that means they're stopping every project, unquote, Nixon says. As for Trudeau's game, quote, the federal government is looking for an excuse. That's all they're doing. They're trying to find an excuse to not let the project go through that was already approved. It's ridiculous, unquote. He says, adding, this is another example of the federal government not playing fair. Quote, they're trying to change the rules of the game, unquote. Trudeau said he wants to work with Alberta. Nixon says this is the Prime Minister's chance to get to work. Quote, it's time for Justin Trudeau to put his money where his mouth is, unquote. Speak the word, Nixon. Speak the word. Quote, Albertans are looking to see if the Prime Minister is serious, and something like Teck can show he is serious about trying to work with us, unquote, says Nixon. Quote, if not, he's going to prove what we all suspect, that he doesn't care about this province and he's going to continue to work against us, unquote. You've got to hand it to Trudeau. Just one day after Premier Kenney pleads to the Trudeau government for thumbs up to the oil sands mine after weeks of Alberta government playing nice to the feds. The Liberals just can't shut up and decide. Instead, They kick us where it hurts. To add insult to injury, it also happens to be the same day a new Angus Reid nose count shows opposition to the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion growing. In Quebec, sucking up the oil money while looking down the noses at us. The opposition is more than half of those polled. It's also up in vote-rich Ontario and vote-rich BC. Guess Kenny's high-priced energy war room better find their mojo and crank up the heat on the naysayers and the usual axe grinders. Speaking of Kenny, the Premier has made it known he's not happy the tech mine isn't already approved, considering how many hoops it has jumped through and how many years it's been jumping. On Monday, talking to the Calgary Press, he didn't sound like he had the wind in his sails. Didn't look like the person who just placed a bet on the horse, thought to be a clear favourite. Now we know. So you just heard the first one, the first piece, and this is the follow-up. This is the response from the Trudeau minion trying to hold Alberta hostage. The piece is entitled, "Alberta Fires Back at Trudeau, Won't Be Held Hostage. Outrage, 3 exclamation mark, prairie fire, and it's spreading." The rage out there in Alberta's heartland is clear and true and no holds barred, real. A raw reality unvarnished by layers of Central Canadian politically correct bull and untainted by the self-serving games of those establishment elitists on power trips who play with working people's lives. I couldn't have put it better myself. Earlier this week, Jonathan Wilkinson, Justin Trudeau's climate change fighter and point man for all things Mother Earth, read Alberta the Riot Act, full stop. The man from Ottawa said Alberta needs to take specific action to get Canada to net zero by 2050. He said Alberta's most recent action has been to fight Trudeau government in the court over carbon tax Liberal Ottawa imposed on Albertans. Trudeau doesn't like the fight in court. The Trudeau government is looking for a concrete action on climate change. Connect the dots. If Alberta wants a yes to tech giants' job-creating frontier oil sands mine, the province has to behave. Jason Nixon is Alberta's environment minister. Nixon is the kind of guy who doesn't take well when the likes of Trudeau are issuing the marching orders. He is also the kind of guy who just can't suck up to the Prime Minister. He asked why Alberta doesn't just give in and drop the court battle against Ottawa, slap on a provincial carbon tax and make Trudeau happy. Quote, "We're not going to be held hostage by the federal government," says Nixon. Quote, "We will continue to fight tooth and nail against Justin Trudeau's job-killing carbon tax. The federal Liberals under Justin Trudeau continue to want to manage and order and boss around the province of Alberta, and we won't accept it," unquote. Quote, "I don't know how to make that any more clear. This is not the federal government's business. Our province has the right to run our resources. That's a fact. We're going to continue to make sure we can," unquote. Nixon is on a roll where too many Alberta politicians are like dead batteries on a cold day. No jumper cables seem to put a spark into them. Quote, "As long as they continue to stomp on Alberta's rights, we will fight them every way we can," unquote, says Nixon of the feds, adding, quote, "Albertans didn't ask Justin Trudeau to come in here and go out of his way to attack our province," unquote. That's good talk. Now, what's the walk? In politics, a lot of tigers turn out to be paper ones. Quote, "Well, see how this plays out. We're not going to show all our cards in the middle of a poker game," unquote. hope he's holding at least a straight flush. In faraway Ottawa, Conservative firebrand MP Shannon Stubbs from the heartland Alberta has no problem mixing it up with the Trudeau Liberals. She'll drop the gloves when the need arises, and the need arises a lot. Stubbs pushes for the track mine, questioning Trudeau and company. The Liberals bob and weave, lining the House of Commons floor with slippery lingo, adding up to the square root of squat. On his face page, Alberta Conservative MP Blake Richards thinks Trudeau is setting us up. He feels he's planning to reject the tech mine, knowing it will stoke the fires of Western separatism. Trudeau can blame the Alberta government for the project's rejection, and the Prime Minister will do all this. He sees his path to a majority government in splitting the Conservative vote in the West. Back home, I've no idea how to pronounce this, it's some Indian name, Amjit Sawi or something, once in Trudeau's inner circle, but shown the door by wise Edmonton voters in the last election, figures there's one hurdle to the tech frontier mine getting the green light, and Kenny must jump it. So he thinks Kenny should sit down with Trudeau government and compromise. You can see where this is going. Premier Jason Kenney is being diplomatic these days, a leader with the patience of Job. Perhaps he believes you actually do catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. Perhaps some folks in his government are confident this story will turn out for the best. They could be right. I have a sneaking suspicion some in Alberta government might even like your scribbler to be a little easier but on the Prime Minister in these trying and tense times. But I can't do it. I just can't do it. The gag reflex just keeps kicking in. So there's two pieces, not particularly well read on my part. I apologise for that. But I did this piece because we don't hear much from the West, which is a disgrace in my opinion, in the media. We just don't hear it. It's all about Ottawa or Toronto. You never hear what's going on in Alberta. And if Alberta was to secede from Canada, it would be an economic disaster for this country. Trudeau knows it, yet he carries on with blinkers on, thinking about votes rather than thinking about the economy of Canada. He is nothing but selfish, and as far as I am concerned, he's not acting as a Prime Minister. He's not honouring the oath to look after the whole of Canada, not just Quebec. I personally think Quebec should be removed from Canada, and that would bugger up his voting majority again in another way. Therefore the Conservatives would be even once more, fighting it out for the 905, whilst the economy tanks. Think about that. While the economy tanks, Quebec disappears God knows where, and who cares? And Alberta is a separate nation. I don't think it would be a separate nation. I think it would become an American protectorate, because they have more in common with America than they do with Canada. And that's what irks Trudeau more than anything else. He hates the Wild West. He hates the bluntness of Albertans, who call it how it is. I love bluntness, and that's where the Canadian Trump is going to come from. And that's what this country needs. It needs to put Quebec in its place, disenfranchise part of Ontario, and put the balance back into Canada. If Canada is to survive, it has to have confidence of the whole country, not just the 905 area and Quebec and a little bit of BC. Canada's bigger than that, but not according to the Quebec French Toronto Liberals. And that's what's wrong with Canada, which could be easily fixed if they really wanted to fix it. But maybe thinks they don't. They're happy with the chaos. Well, be careful what you wish for.
You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, Spotify, and email. We're on Spotify under the podcast section. Type in Canadian Politics with a Twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass these links on to your friends. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com/A-Radio. EHRADIO, A-Radio. And please click on the like button. Join us Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern and tell your friends and pass the word. We only tell the truth, not what the mainstream media want you to know.